everyone, thanks for tuning in to an all-new episode of the American Huddle. We're glad to be back. I'm Hali alongside Andy Gresh. It's hard to believe we're headed into week 11 of the college football season, only 2 weeks to go. Andy, how much are you looking forward to watching some football this week?
I can't wait because the games are great. We're into the month of November. Of course, we know turkey time is right around the corner, and that means conference championship weekend. A lot riding for the American Athletic Conference. I know we got some work to do still in the West. The East is pretty easy. It's going to be a ton of fun as we work through the scenarios over the next couple of weeks.
Well, you hit the nail on the head today. We're going to break down all of the championship scenarios. There's quite a few ways this thing can still play out, and I know we're happy to have you back in here talking some football. I know the fans are very excited as well, and we're looking good today. We're on the same page, matching. You look matching that sunset, the glow right behind you.
Is that what that is behind us? A sunset, or is that a bunch of lights? Like
I don't know. I think it's like artistic.
Well, we've changed it like 4 times already as we've been trying to get this done. And look, it's nice to have you back, world traveler.
Thank you.
Get those airline miles cranking.
I know. Well, I'm back and I'm in it for the long haul now. So it's all football from here on out for me.
Good. So, finally.
Well, let's get to some football. So looking back to last weekend, what we had spent quite a bit of time talking about in weeks prior was SMU controlling their own destiny. They hit the road to Annapolis to face a Navy team that's kind of been struggling here this past month, and trying to find their identity. But the Mustangs drop a tough one on the road. A last-second field goal by the midshipmen make them bowl eligible. But it's also making those Mustangs hoping for some things to happen in the West Division.
Well, it's a couple of things. Number one, for Navy, it keeps them in contention in the West, which I know we're going to get to. And look, it was really a tale of two halves. Navy ran out to the early lead, and then our guy, Cortland Sutton, just took over that football game down the sidelines, over the middle. It didn't matter. Sutton was catching footballs all over the place. And, you know, Chad Morris is very lucky that he can just go, all right, let's throw it to the guy who we know is going to be a pro. And with all due respect to the Navy athletes, there are very few pros that are on their roster. That's why Kenya Matalolo does things the way he does. So it was just talent winning out in terms of Sutton getting them back into that game. But that was a whale of a football game. You feel for SMU because they've had a heck of a year. And for Navy, they just keep finding ways to win. It doesn't matter if it's 17-14 or what we saw 43-40, they find ways to win.
Well, finding ways to win in large part comes to veteran leadership, and that's something that this Navy football team has. Let's take a look at this Showtime clip from Senior Week that aired this week in that series leading up to the game against SMU.
The biggest part of our culture is the love that you guys have for each other. But to me, this meeting is really what our program's about. So with that said, I'll turn the time over to seniors.
To be real with you, man, when I was in the lowest point, I was actually kicked off the team myself. But Coach Nehemiah turned around and decided that it was not in my best interest for me not to be a part of the team. He said I need to be with you guys. And ever since then, without me asking any of you, y'all have literally given me a reason to fight and stay here. And when I say I love you, like, I will literally go to the ends of the earth for every person in this room.
It's been about 5 years for my dad passing. I want to say thank you to every single person in this room. My dad's up there watching me right now. He sees every single one of y'all. He's protecting every single one of us. By the end of this senior season, if I'm not dragged off of the field, broken bones and all, I haven't done justice to every single one of you in this room.
This whole year I've been battling in my head. I only got 6 more games, 5 more games. And I think it wasn't the football games that I would count down. I think it was more so the amount of time that I have left with you guys. Everybody in this room went through some hard times here, and we all got through them together. And this is a family, and I just want y'all to know that no matter what, I love every single one of y'all. I just enjoy my time being on this team and being able to play next to y'all. So thank y'all for that.
Look, Hali, at the end of the day, we know what that's like. To be there where you know time is ticking away, the sand's out of the hourglass, and you know that it's going to be among the last games that you play. And it's genuine emotion from those athletes. And there may be few places that are more special to play at than the Naval Academy, and you could see that come out in that clip.
Yeah, absolutely. An emotional week, and the Mids are headed to another bowl yet again, and obviously that Army-Navy game still to look forward to here at the end of the season. But they still got a few big games to play. One of those coming up this weekend on the road at Notre Dame, and Navy's a team with some question marks. We saw Malcolm Perry get the surprising start at quarterback last week, had a lights-out performance, earned the American Offensive Player of the Week accolades, but unfortunately suffered an ankle injury, so he's nursing a sprained ankle. So now it's a quarterback competition between this year's original starters, Zach Abey and Garrett Lewis.
It's pretty amazing that it's a competition at this point in the year, considering how well Zach Abey played early on. I think he will end up getting the job because there's a little more film on him, let's say. You know what he can do, but Coach Ken runs it the way he runs it. He's going to create competition. And you even saw at the end of that game against SMU, getting guys onto the field for the last-second kick, very reminiscent of Coach Ken's friend Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots when they did that earlier this year. But look, at the end of the day, they're going to play a Notre Dame team that's probably going to be wound up tighter than a watch because they got smoked against Miami. Great opportunity for Navy to add not only to their resume, but to continue to build the American Athletic Conference with the great year they've had so far.
Well, the Mids actually won this game against Notre Dame last season, so looking for back-to-back wins against the Irish. But let's move back into conference play and take a look at the standings. As we mentioned, today is all about talking about the big picture, the championship scenarios. So looking at the standings, eliminated from championship contention is Cincinnati, UConn, ECU, Temple, Tulsa, and Tulane. USF, UCF, Houston, and Memphis are the only schools that can host this championship. So let's see, 6 teams eliminated at this point. Some are still looking for bowl eligibility, however, but for UCF and USF, they're the ones on the East that can still play in this game, and Memphis, Houston, Navy, and SMU on the West. Initial thoughts looking at just that there's 6 teams. It's hard to believe with 2 weeks left that there's actually 6 teams that can find a way into this game.
Yeah, it is, and especially in a really tough West division where Memphis has clearly set themselves apart. There's no question. But you have Houston in there. I think we knew, and my prediction was that Navy was going to win the division. I'm not so sure about that now, but the fact that they're still in it shows you the level of consistency with which they play with. And then SMU, you got to give Chad Morris's crew a ton of credit. To even have a chance at this point is big for that program. And then on the other side, I think we could see this coming a mile away. UCF, USF in the East. We knew it was going to come down to probably that last game of the year. If everything holds this weekend, we're going to get a play-in game on that side to the conference title game, and then the conference championship game for the American Athletic Conference might be a play-in to a New Year's Six bowl. So basically, playoff football has started.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting without question. And, I've been seeing fans talk about this on social media the past couple of weeks, all kind of hashing it out, what can happen, who can host this game, who can play in this game, and it all can get a little bit confusing.
Yes.
So let's do our best to break it down for you. On the East side, a couple of actually pretty big games this week that could help kind of decide a few things. So if UCF beats Temple and USF loses to Tulsa on Thursday night, the Knights would clinch the East this week. If USF beats Tulsa on Thursday, then as you mentioned it's going to come down to the winner of UCF-USF Thanksgiving week on November 24th. On the West, if Memphis beats SMU on Saturday or ECU on November 25th, they clinch the West. So they basically have to win one of their last 2 games to clinch the West Division. However, this is where it could get interesting.
Here we go.
Is if the Tigers lose out, all of a sudden Houston, Navy, and SMU are all in the mix. So if Houston beats Tulane and Navy, then Houston would win the West.
Wow, there's
now
a lot there.
I'm starting to confuse myself a little bit.
All right, so let's just look at the East first, Haley, right? So we have UCF and USF. All they really have to do is hold serve. USF will play a game on Thursday that will determine where they're at. I probably jumped ahead a little bit here, but that's fine. And then you have UCF where, again, I saw what they did against UConn, and they had the turnover. The game was close, and then boom, fourth quarter, here comes the separation. So for UCF, not only are they playing for an American championship, they're playing for a chance to go to a New Year's Six bowl. So there's an extra layer of motivation there that I don't think they're going to, sprain their ankle in the pothole, so to speak. Whereas USF, they still have some work to do. Then it's that big USF-UCF battle. The alphabet soup that you just went through and all the scenarios in the West, you're right, it can get a little mind-numbing. But, the Houston scenario is pretty interesting. Now, I know Memphis has to kind of stumble along the way, but Houston is a team worth keeping an eye on here in terms of the West Division in the American Athletic Conference. I feel good about Memphis making it there. But again, that defense, we've talked about it all year. It's great that you can win 40-30, but what happens when you only score 25 points? Is your defense going to be able to hold up and get you a win?
Well, I think what makes the West Division so interesting is that a lot of these teams, the 4 teams rather, that are still in contention to play in the championship, they're all kind of playing each other here in the last couple weeks of the season. So when you talk about tiebreakers, these games are pretty important. SMU and Memphis this weekend, and then Houston and Navy in the final week of the season. So all these teams are kind of playing each other here in the last 2 weeks.
And Haley, I think it's important to remind everyone that whomever has the best record is going to host the American Conference Championship game. So again, for UCF, we've talked about the extra layers of what they've really got on the line. There's also the hosting that game, having it in your home yard and playing it down in Orlando. That's something to remember, because there is a scenario where Houston could host the conference championship game. I don't want to get too nutty on people, but at the end of the day, home field matters. And to me, that's one of the great moves that Commissioner Oresco has made. You reward someone for regular season consistency by allowing them to have the conference championship game at the team with the overall best record.
Yeah, it's definitely something that motivates these players to have the best record in conference. And what a great segue. So let's talk about who can still host and how they can get there.
Like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, we're here to talk a little bit crazy. So we're going to talk about all 4 of the teams left in contention to host this championship and how they can do so. So starting off, UCF right now, the overwhelming favorite, in position to control their own destiny in terms of hosting. So the Knights are hosting in Orlando regardless. If they are 8-0 or 7-1, winning the East, they will host the West Division champion. However, Memphis would host at 7-1 if USF is the East Division champion at 7-1 or 6-2. So if the Tigers win the rest of their games and USF wins the East Division, we are headed to Memphis for the championship game. Still
okay,
with me.
I
Still
got
with
you.
me.
UCF, Memphis.
Yes.
Here come the other scenarios.
Okay, so USF would host if the Tigers lose one of their next 2. So a USF-Memphis game if the Tigers should lose one of these next 2 games.
Yep.
We're headed to Tampa.
Okay.
USF would host Houston if the Cougars find a way to win this West Division with a little help from Memphis. So another scenario where we can end up in Tampa, and here's where we get a little bit crazy.
Okay.
Houston can also still host. The last of these 4 teams with a chance to host this game, they would host USF if the Bulls win the East and the Bulls' conference record is 6-2. We are headed to Houston.
Holy cow, I got you. So basically we have 4 teams right now, UCF, USF, Houston, or Memphis, that could host the American Athletic Conference Championship game. There we go. There's your brass tacks.
There we go.
How about that?
4 teams left. That's what you need to know.
Okay, so
All
there
right.
are 6 who could represent, 2 in the East and 4 in the West, and there are 4 who could host the conference title.
They're pretty
game.
good.
There we
You
go.
got it.
Got it.
Simple as that. We could have just said it that way.
No, because we had to roll through the scenarios for everyone so they can get all excited.
But basically a couple of games on the schedule this weekend that will eliminate some of these possible scenarios. So we'll even have a clearer picture next week, maybe.
Let's hope. I think we will.
All right, well, 6 teams left in contention to appear in the championship game, but 6 is a common number because we also have 6 teams that are bowl eligible at this point in the season. Houston, Memphis, Navy, SMU, UCF, and USF, but 2 teams with a couple games left that still can clinch bowl eligibility. One of those is Temple. They need 1 win in their last 2 games. UCF this weekend, that's going to be a tough one. But they also play Tulsa in the last game of the season.
That is winnable.
That is a winnable game. Tulane, on the other hand, they need to win against Houston and SMU. They need both of those, so 2 very tough opponents in the West Division. But Willie Fritz's crew can still get it done.
No question.
So,
the opportunity is there for them. They just got to go out and win a couple of football games. And then it's where do you fit into the bowl schedule? Just get eligible. That's the motto. Be eligible, let the rest take care of itself.
All right, well, let's dive into the games coming up this week a little bit deeper. So we've talked a lot about, championship contention, host sites, bowl eligibility, but kind of breaking these things down to the nitty-gritty and what needs to happen. So Thursday night, big game, as we mentioned, Tulsa versus USF. The Bulls, this is kind of a must-win for them if they want to control their own destiny still and playing in the championship game and having it come down to that UCF game Thanksgiving week. So as the Bulls get ready to take on Tulsa, what are some of the keys so that Charlie Strong's crew can just keep rolling and get the job done?
I think for them, it's hold the point total down on Tulsa. They have the ability to do so. Tulsa has been very inconsistent offensively this year. And for USF, again, you get by Tulsa, then you've got the de facto divisional championship game that next week. And I think that's a big motivation for Charlie Strong and his crew. I expect the defense to play well. I expect Quentin Flowers to have a big day. I expect USF to handle their business.
All right, well, another game this week that's going to be extremely important and a chance actually for Memphis to just claim the West Division title, seal the deal this week. Still have to wait a week in terms of whether or not they're going to host, but they can punch their ticket to the American Championship with a win against SMU. This is going to be a really tough game. I'm very excited to tune into it because I think this one could go either way.
Yeah, I'm with you because, again, that Memphis defense that we've talked about all year long here on the American Huddle, going against those wide receivers who have been able to eat. They've been able to feast a lot this year, just like they were in that Navy game. And, again, you could argue that maybe the most talented wide receiver in the conference plays at SMU and Cortland Sutton. Memphis got to find a way to deal with that. Quite honestly, Haley, I think this game's in the 40s, and the big turnover is what will cause will be the difference between a win and a loss in this game. Riley Ferguson's got to be smart on the Memphis side of things, and for SMU, you can go in and play with nothing to lose. No one had expectations for them this year other than the people at SMU. So go in there, chuck it around the lot, let it fly, put pressure on this Memphis defense. Might come down to a turnover or a kick.
All right, well, definitely some playmakers on the Memphis side as well. I imagine SMU will not be kicking, at least intentionally, to Tony Pollard.
No, you'd rather kick it out of bounds and just put him on the 40 than you would kicking it to Tony Pollard because he can rip it from anywhere on the field.
He's having a heck of a season.
Yeah, he is.
Wow. All right, well, some other notable games on Saturday. We talked about UCF versus Temple. The Owls looking for bowl eligibility under Jeff Collins in his first year as the head coach. They've lost a couple of close games this year. I think they were hoping to be bowl eligible by this point, but definitely still something that is attainable for them against a really good UCF team rather. They're playing at home in Philadelphia. How do you knock off the Knights, if at all?
You got to try to match toughness with them because they're arguably the toughest team mentally and physically in the American Athletic Conference. And, you try to get the fans wound up and getting off to a good start as well. I think is really important. UCF playing that game against UConn 28-10 at the half or 27-10, I think it was. And you're looking at them, okay, here goes UCF once again. Then they committed the turnover. UConn was able to hang around. So I think you got to get off to a good start. You can't be afraid to try to punch them in the mouth and then match them toe-to-toe. I mean, look, Mackenzie Milton is playing great right now. We know what UCF has on the line. Here's what I would like to know, Haley. Has the folks of the American Athletic Conference sent Scott Frost an American onesie the way that Randy Edsall gave Scott Frost the little UConn onesie before last week's game?
You know what? I know that conference staff is very, very good about that stuff, so I don't want to give a definite answer, but
okay.
Randy Edsall was pretty quick to the punch. I mean,
he really was. That was a good move on his part, right?
Yeah, that was an excellent move, and I don't know if Coach Frost has announced the name of the baby yet, but man, they've been really unveiling this stuff as the week went on. Just a very exciting time for the UCF family, and it's been fun kind of watching it unfold on social media. So.
Yeah, no question. They've done a great job with it. from what is that party that they have down there at UCF that we talked about a couple?
Splash.
There we go, the Spirit Splash, all the way to him telling the team that hey, it's a great win and the kid's birthday, and you know what was genuine about that though was the way the team reacted and the way they rallied around the coach and how happy they were. Him announcing something like that. That was one of the rare times we saw Scott Frost smile in 2017, which is good to see as well. But his kids had a real genuine reaction to let you know that that football team is buying what he is preaching.
So how often do you think we're going to see Baby Frost in the UConn?
You know what? I don't know.
It's a nice thought.
It is. I think
seems a little controversial.
Yeah, I have a funny feeling that at some point, whenever they're at Rentschler Field, Mrs. Frost ends up putting a little one in there. But that was it was pretty cool. It was a good touch. And who knows when we'll see it? Hey, maybe before the New Year's Six game or something like that. We get to see all the collection of stuff that the Frosts have been able to accumulate because people have been giving them gifts because of the little one. Well, and congratulations to them, by the way.
Yes, and you know what? We could have a chance here in a couple of weeks to bring a gift in person should you see us be in the championship game.
How about that?
Great moment there. So going out of conference, though, for a second, we mentioned Navy at Notre Dame, but the other one I want to talk to you about is UConn versus Boston College. Kind of a neat opportunity for Randy Edsall, speaking of, and crew to play inside Fenway Park on a Saturday night up here in New England. That's got to be pretty cool. Fenway's an awesome place.
I did a game last weekend at Fenway, and there's a couple of things in terms of the actual play on the field. One is where they put down the turf where the diamond is and where the dirt normally is, second base pitcher's mound. They've been taking care of that and making sure that it's okay, and it does affect the kicking game on that end of the field. The other thing, too, about playing in Fenway is you can't get caught looking around. It can't be the whole, wow, look at where I am.
You mean there's things to look at inside that place?
That's the green monster, and you've got to get over it. So I think that Friday trip, whenever you roll in there, you run around on the field, you look around the ballpark, you get your pictures, you make sure you send them to mom and dad and all that.
Instagram, Twitter.
There you go.
And then so
on Saturday, you are ready to play a football game. And let's make no mistake about it. It's against another Power 6 school in terms of Boston College. UConn is going to have to bring the fight. And it's a cool place to call and to watch a game at Fenway. It'll be great for both those schools. And we heard the emotional response from the Navy players here earlier on the American Huddle. There's going to be a lot of that, I think, for the UConn and the Boston College players as well, where as you start to wind down the schedule on some of those seniors' careers, to play it in a place like Fenway Park adds another layer of memory to it.
Well, New England is home for a lot of these players. Two Northeast teams squaring it off not too far from each other inside one of the most historic baseball stadiums in America. So I think it's kind of an interesting subject, always watching, the baseball stadium being transformed into a football stadium, I guess, so to speak. So where's the best seat in the house for a football game at Fenway? Is it the Green Monster?
I would say yes.
Okay.
It's the Green Monster. And here's the thing is that the teams are on the same sideline. So from the 50 to the goal line and the 50 to the goal line, you have each of the teams up. And some schools put up this giant tarp, where they just put rods in it and stretch it out so there's no espionage. But yes, if you watch it from the Monster, you'll get to see both sidelines and you get the field of play. It's the best place.
Interesting. So I guess if you're on the other side of, is that weird for coaches then, not being able to travel down
it is. And in fact, the quarterbacks are going to be the ones that are going to log the most miles of running, because if they got to run all the way to the other side of the 50 to get the play call, then they're going back into the huddle as well. If you're a coach, normally you can't roll down to the goal line. The way it's set up here, you could be right near the goal line barking signals or yelling at the officials or whatnot. It's definitely an interesting dynamic at Fenway, but if you get there early, get on the Monster and watch it from there.
Oh, wow, that's a true Boston accent.
Yeah, of course. New England.
Wow. All right, well, that'll be a great one to tune into, a 7 p.m. kick here in New England. Now, lastly, want to wrap up the show. So we've talked about championship contention, some of the marquee matchups this weekend, and the fact that there's only 2 weeks left in the college football season. But something that is pretty important that started happening a couple weeks ago are the college football playoff rankings. These matter for a couple of different reasons. One, when it comes to actually hosting this game, if two teams have the same conference record, it comes down to who's ranked highest in the CFP to host. And then obviously the winner of the championship game, if they are the highest ranked team in the college football playoff, they have the chance to play in that New Year's Six bowl game. So a couple of reasons that these rankings are important. So two teams ranked in the college football playoffs latest rankings, UCF at 15, Memphis at 21. Each of these teams moved up a couple of spots. Is UCF ranked high enough?
No, they're getting screwed, quite honestly. And when you look at the side-by-side comparison to what UCF has played and who they've played versus, say, someone like a Wisconsin, and I know that Wisconsin's got two big games coming up. We know the Wisconsin, what do they normally do? 9-0, 10-0, whoop, they slip on the banana peel. They rule themselves out of maybe being in the Final Four. But UCF is very comparable to Wisconsin. Notre Dame slid down into the top 10. They're a Navy loss away, quite honestly, from being out of the top 10. I just think UCF has not gotten enough respect. They went on the road and beat Maryland. We know who they've beaten in the American Athletic Conference. They played a tough schedule. Scott Frost has got them rolling. And the eye test, and that's the part of this committee that gets me, is that I don't think there's enough of the eye test going on to where they actually flip on a UCF game and they look at how they're tough, how they've persevered through adversity this year, how whenever they have the chance, they will choke you out like an MMA fighter. I just don't think there's enough respect there, because I wonder exactly how many of those people on the committee are just, here's my handout, and this is what Carmine the computer said that I should be looking at and figuring it out, versus people who actually watch these games and understand the arc of the season for Central Florida.
Well, UCF has definitely put on those style points, I would say, in a lot of the games this season. I mean, they are not only winning, but they're winning in a pretty convincing way. And maybe a chance to get some of those eyes on that team, rather, could be in that last week of the season, an ABC game, 3:30 Eastern against USF, who's another team that draws some attention as well. So maybe a chance to get some eyeballs there. But what I want to ask you is, a lot of one-loss teams, they're even talking some two-loss teams making it into the college football playoff. And there's a very good chance UCF could go undefeated. If at all, if possible, how can UCF make their case to be considered in playoff contention when it comes to the bigger picture?
Honestly, Haley, they need a little bit of chaos. They need, an Auburn to beat an Alabama. Now, then again, that would have Alabama as a one-loss team, not in a Southeastern Conference championship game, so they still might be able to get in. I think what you need are just upsets. You need UCF to hold up their end of the bargain. This week, you'd like to see a big score. If we're talking about, and look, I'm not hating on any other team in the conference. I'm just evaluating UCF and how they get there. They need a big win. Then you beat USF. And if you do that in impressive fashion, you move on to a conference championship game. There's no way, if they're undefeated heading into conference championship weekend, that they're not at least in the top 10, if not in the top 8. And then at that point, you're rooting for upsets. You're looking for chaos. And they have to handle their business as well. They maybe would have to beat a tough Memphis team. Who knows if it's Navy that's going to be in there. The bottom line is the only thing UCF can do, Haley, is go out and do what they've done all year. Play tough, beat people up, make it look good. Root for chaos in every other situation and see where the chips fall. But there's no question that if they get a crack at a quote-unquote blue blood, Scott Frost and that crew is going to bring it, and they're going to punch him in the mouth, and they're going to have a difficult time dealing with the Knights because they are that good. They're worthy of getting a crack at one of these so-called teams that, again, these stat crunchers and nerds are putting together in terms of these rankings.
Well, I think one interesting thing is that if, the season ended today, we'd have UCF and Memphis in the championship game, two teams ranked in the CFP's top 25. So a chance possibly for UCF to beat another top 25
team. Well, and I think it's a two-way street in that if it is UCF undefeated against a one-loss Memphis team and say Memphis beats them, then to me Memphis should be able to grab that spot in the New Year's Six. To me, if it's those two teams, the American Conference Championship game is a play-in into a New Year's Six bowl. Now, whether that's going to happen or whether that's going to go down, that remains to be seen, but that's the way it should be in my mind.
All right. Wow.
That's a lot. We had
Man,
a big winding roadmap today.
That was a lot, but it's all good though, because it's going to be extremely exciting to watch the finish for this season, both on the east side and the west side. A lot can happen this weekend, so I'm excited to have you back in here next week, because I think we're going to have some clarity. I like clarity.
So this week, the road was winding. Next week, it might be straight path to the American Championship game.
All right, well, a big weekend of football coming ahead, and we will be here next week. We won't leave you hanging again. I apologize for my absence last week. But
you had to work. You were doing stuff on the American Digital Network, so that's fine.
The other football, the soccer championships.
Well,
2 great championships, might I add. We saw some exciting finishes, overtime in both. So free soccer, more soccer than I could have asked for.
I would prefer the popular nomenclature of communist football. And I know you're a communist football player, but that's how I view it. That's just me, because I'm a pigskin guy.
All right. Well, it's all.
And I'm not picking. I'm not. I'm just.
Well, it'll be your way from here on out.
There you go. That's
fine.
I like that.
Got a couple teams in the NCAA tournament, but I'll be holding down the fort here for a little bit.
Now you're talking. I like that. It's my way the rest of
all
the way.
About Andy for a couple more weeks here as the football season comes to a close. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on the American Huddle. We'll see you back here next Thursday. On behalf of Andy Gresh, I'm Hali Outen. Have a great weekend.